The recording is now in progress. I hate the way Zoom does that. Like this voice cuts in. Lauren, do we have any members of the public who would like to engage us?
None.
I feel our ratings are down in the summer. We really need to think about a better fall season, like the cartoons, you know, and they used to put out the TV guide.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do minutes? Any comments on the minutes?
Move to approve.
Ooh.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Excellent. All right, Lauren, I think we were getting to some good material last time. So do you want to do your split screen trick?
Give me just 1 second. I'm getting
Sure.
a call
Go right
from
ahead.
my mom, and my mom never calls me.
Yeah, go right ahead. We'll just talk about procedure while you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So so my hope is that because we're sailing right into the powers of the commission, and maybe since maybe Liz, since you're not here next week, maybe we can even skip forward to Board of Finance just for a little bit, because that's one of our big items. And just, you know, we'll see. But my hope is that maybe with a little bit of a session on the 2nd, that we might be pretty close to done with this kind of, you know, straightforward march through. And if that's okay, whether it's the 2nd or the next meeting, then my thought was we'll just review all the changes and then talk about more outreach and a public hearing kind of thing. Though it struck me sometime in the last 2 weeks that maybe when we get to that part, we might want to revisit the selectmen, since they're the ones that charged us, and at least, you know, report back to them either in whole or in part.
Sounds like a plan. Not sure we'll get through everything in 2 sections. Having done this a couple of times, there's some, even though there's not a lot, it's still, there's 11 sections and we're on 4.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's the other way around. You know, once we're through the duties of the 2 boards, the rest is maybe not as dense, but is a lot. You know, like it's
a lot.
Yeah. So, but either way, I think we're getting closer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think where we left last time is we started talking about the general powers. I know without Lauren doing the scroll. Oh,
I'm here. I'm back.
oh, everything okay?
Yep.
Okay. In that case, we started talking about sort of general powers of the first selectman. And I'm trying to remember exactly where we left off. I know this was this section, but I think we were right. We were right here, weren't we?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I think I think we used this as an occasion to talk about making it clear that the first selectman can, I guess the way that I think about it, and I don't know if I'm in sync with everyone, can staff the department the way that he or she wants.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
Yep.
Is that pretty much our sense?
You know, I have some concerns only because I wonder if we're putting a first selectman in a position right away. They have to defend I know it says generally they can do what they want, but you know, any change, no matter who's doing it, is always pushed back a little bit. I think we should do everything to help a first, especially a new one, be successful. And I'm wondering if we should just give a little more detail in this case that it might help.
Like some narrative in there that.
Well, almost, you know, we at one point talked about a town administrator or whatever it was in here, and nobody knows how that came out. It was never finished. And it really is bothersome that was just taken out. But I think it would have helped us be able to move forward. I remember years ago trying to work on when Helen Berlin was working with the town, and we looked at that position for her and working on, I think that's when Fillmore and I were working on the committee to try to look to what it could look like. And I don't remember who was first. Oh, I think Al was first selectman. I think he was, or it was right after. I can't remember. We were trying to make an easier way for him to present what he wanted. And this wasn't some pie in the sky idea. It was something the town had thought about. I don't know. I just want to make, I don't want a first selectman to have to fight for every new idea or new organization and all. I think they should have rights. I just want to, there's some way you could help them. That's all.
So so do you want, are you thinking something explicit like, it shall be the province of the first selectman to structure the management of town hall staff as he or she's fit within the confines of agreements, labor
Well, Joe,
agreements
Joe could go further, which may include a town administrator, blah, blah, blah. Which may,
See, I don't know if we want to get into naming because like when there's been so many, things that have evolved. So we no longer have the comptroller or treasurer because we have a director of finance. But before that, there were a lot of part-time jobs. I think if I like Joe's kind of global view and to start naming specific things,
yeah.
if the person comes in and says, no, I don't want that person, then it's like, well, the charter says it's in there. So you could go the reverse.
Joan, believe me, I'm not saying mandate. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I'm not mandating anything. I'm just trying to find a way to open a door for future selectmen or present selectmen. That's all.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the charter's charge. Maybe I'm thinking the wrong. But I just think when a person comes in and is making change, there's always pushback. I don't care who it is.
Right.
And if there's some way we could just help that transition a little bit. That this isn't pie in the sky. That it's something that can and could be considered or should be.
Yeah,
But
yeah, one of the Noreen, your point's a good one because the charter was used this way in kind of a weird structure, which I don't want to say weird because I wasn't, paying attention to it at the time, but it did seem to be used in a way to get into this very question.
well,
So-
we were trying to look for what the future could look like, and
Yeah,
I'll tell you,
I don't even know if it was really at that point, Noreen. I don't think it was when you guys were doing it, but
well, we actually the selectmen were talking about a town administrator, definitely at that point, and who the person would, and really kind of fell apart was if this person, it was because of the charter, if this person would report to just the first selectman or the whole board. And that's where, and I think as far as the leaving the, disappearing from the charter, that could just be a typo. That could be someone typing in and left a part out. Because one time we had it in, but the pages that referred to the statutes or the section of the charter referred to wasn't included. And then it was gone totally. And it might have just been done with a, a type with the review and all, and no one made that decision. I don't want to hold everybody up. I'm just thinking down the road. As we know, look, we talked about town manager. We know things maybe can't stay the way they are. But town business is much bigger than it used to be. And, I remember when Betsy Quilliam was the only person in the finance department. She had one little office with a safe.
Right.
And, but that's, that's what everything's changed. Anyway, just a thought. I'm not going to hold you all up.
So maybe something along the lines of, it shall be the sole province of the first selectman to define the reporting relationships of staff in town hall, up to and including appointing someone in a overall supervisory capacity. Like, you know what I mean? That's that way, because I think, Joan, I think you make a really good point about not calling the name because that's loaded, but just being clear that it's up to the first selectman to structure people.
Right. And I mean, supervisory capacity can be supervisory of Board of Finance, financial things, HR thing. I mean, there's a lot of different department heads. So I think that this became a real crazy thing when we were trying to do it. And then we tried to define that chief administrative officer and had a huge long paragraph and did all of these things. And it really didn't work last time. So that's why I'm thinking maybe I like Joe's approach, in the making it fairly general that they will, she'll be the chief executive and chief administrative officer, and she'll delegate responsibilities and management of town employees type of thing.
I'm fine with that because my whole point is I don't want a first selectman to find any change being suspect or a pushback. If it's in the charter that this is the potential's there and this person has the right to do it, or at least to propose it, because obviously they're all going to have to vote. But I'm fine with what Joe said. And it doesn't have to be with any titles or anything.
Bob has his hand raised.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Bob.
I have
Sorry,
a
I don't have
sort of-
everyone's face up. ahead.
suggestion that's not, it may be more substantive than I think it is, but it seems to me that that paragraph is really hard to read. That you get the first sentence, which is fine, and then the second, I think if we bulletized the rest of it, it would be much clearer. So if starting with the second sentence, it was the first selectman shall, and then be the
Oh.
chief executive, blah, 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 because that would separate them. And I also wonder about the difference between powers versus duties, which is the next category. But I think it would be much easier to understand it if it's bulletized.
Or
I actually-
ABC, yeah.
Or
Yeah,
ABC.
I think that's a really good idea, you know, because frankly, it'll make it easier to review, and it may look different to us later.
That's what I'm
Right.
thinking. Sometimes if you look and say, wait a second, this one's really weird and that should go somewhere else. Or why don't we also say X as a power? Because it's nowhere else.
Well, if we decide to bullet it, we should consider doing that in other parts of the charter just to keep it uniform, but I think that's a fine idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of bullets throughout this, so I think this is good.
Okay, good.
But by the way, I put in the chat some, you know, this is drafted on the fly, so I apologize, but some language for, you know, the first selectman issue we were discussing. And I don't know if that looks good to anybody, or please diss on it to your heart's content.
Should be the sole province of the structure reporting among the town employees up to including lead administrative managerial officer. Once again, you're giving an administrative managerial officer. So I think ending it just among the town employees, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fine. The lawyer in me wants to point out, of course, it can never be the sole province of the first selectman because there's union contracts and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, at least I think this would make it clear.
But I
I'd like-
think the first
Sorry.
part of that, what we have today, I mean, all that exists today. Right now, the first selectman can decide who reports to them or her or him, and they can decide how it's going to be, how they're going to set it up. Many selectmen have done it different ways, but I think that is done. I don't know if the Board of Selectmen even vote on it. I think it's just done by the first. So we're not changing it. I think we're just opening a door.
The board does vote when changes are made.
The board votes on every hire and fire except for seasonal temporary employees as of right
Yep.
now.
So you
Yep.
can tell I've been away for 10 years. I forgot that.
So I like
Maybe you
that.
don't want, maybe Joan, you're having trouble with lead administrative managerial officer, or maybe there's something else we could
Yeah,
say.
because then you're introducing an officer that it doesn't exist right now.
How about something about any new,
Well, how about just the reporting
Relationship.
structure of reporting relationships among the town employees and just ending it there?
I think we need more. I really do. I think even it's said, even open the door to future and to, oh, I don't know. That's the tough one.
What's the problem that's trying to be solved here?
There was a time when, and I think there are a couple of things going on where there was an attempt to take and create effectively what we have now, where the first selectman was going to take a person and then have that town employee be the chief operating officer. They were calling it that, but everyone was going to report to him. And then the question was, partially because of that dangling language, well, does that tantamount to a town manager? And if that's the case, then are you against the charter? And what about this other piece? It's not enabled. And it was a little bit of I would say this differently if we were together, a confusing show of interpretation. And I think that from my perspective, it's a management job. You should be able to structure people the way you want. The charter shouldn't be standing in the way.
Right. How about be responsible for the structure of the reporting relationship among town employees, including all direct reports? You know what I'm saying?
I'm actually coming around to your position of just cut the sentence off town
Town
employees, period.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what else we need. So the
Well,
problem
that-
is solved.
That
Is-
hasn't solved it. That is exactly what we have today. We're not solving a problem for new first selectmen to want to bring in a new person? Nothing, I don't see where that says it here.
Well, it doesn't have to say that because they're saying you have the responsibility of the reporting structure, reporting relationships among the town employees, including current and future employees. How does that sound? Current and future employees.
That's better. Or new.
Reporting
new-
relationship
or-
among the town's current and future employees. And that way there, it's because, for instance, we just
That's fine.
combined beach and rec with senior. So that reporting structure has changed. So,
We went back to the way it used to be. When I was chairman of Beach and Rec, we had seniors under us.
mhm.
So it's reverted back to most likely should never have changed, but I don't think right now there's a reporting issue. And if we're gonna just clarify what they're doing right now, that's fine for the charter. I was just trying to think of a future, or I was thinking more, not reporting as much as organizational, future organizational, but I don't want to hold everybody up.
Did that change of combining the senior and the beach and rec, did that have to be voted on by the selectmen, or was that just done?
Well, I'll tell you, it was gotta be 20 years ago. I believe
No,
it was.
just recently.
That was voted on.
Oh, it must have been voted on, yeah.
How about responsible for the structure of organization and reporting relationships?
Yeah, I think I like the idea of the organization in there.
Yeah,
You bring
I
up
like
that,
that.
that's a good point, Noreen, the organization and reporting.
Like that better.
yeah, me too.
There you go.
Because those words would help a first select.
Yes. Yep.
So just to clarify, worded like that, then, when they recently combined the senior and the beach and rec, then now with this wording, it would not need to be voted on, correct?
Well, we just heard from Lauren that they vote on all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
but
board of,
he's saying with what you just added, does that take the power from the full board and give it solely to the first selectman? That's what David is questioning.
let's go back to what the Board of Selectmen powers were. So, oops, I'm gonna get the chat out of my face here. Contracting on, what does that mean? Okay. Employment.
Shall appoint, hire, determine the conditions of employment, discharge appointed officials and employees of the town pursuant to Article 7. Let me see what we changed. in this, 4.1.4.
Maybe we say with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, like we've done in other places.
It's all throughout I agree.
Yeah, but the only thing is, though, is that the new wording says that it's the sole provenance of the first selectman.
Let's
We didn't
scroll.
include that.
Yeah,
We
we didn't
just
include that.
said, be responsible for the organizational structure and reporting relationships among the town's current and future employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not talking
How about with the approval of the Board of Selectmen? Well,
Why?
well, the
Do they need it?
personnel policy, administrative and personnel policies in D now, the new D. Does
Yeah.
that cover it then?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think, what we're saying here is not necessarily who's getting hired and fired or discharged. What we're saying is they are responsible for saying, of the staff we have, here is the hierarchical structure of this staff.
Right.
And if we're hiring new staff, here's where they fit on that organizational chart.
Right.
Is there an org chart? No, sorry.
Several?
I'm just.
There are
I'm-
some mysteries that are not for charter review.
And just to
Yeah.
throw a monkey wrench in there, Cheshire has like 15 positions in their charter that have to be hired.
Oh, I think that's. I think that's a road down. I don't
Boy, that
like
sounds
path.
great. Let's do that.
What, you know what? I missed that part of the meeting when we were discussing the treasurer. I mean, that was Don Oslander or his brother. Is we don't have that position anymore because of the finance department? There's no one that comes in as a treasurer for our town?
No, so state statute does not mandate it anymore. And so Don actually was serving as the comptroller, and we had an assistant comptroller who was a staff member. And we went to the attorney about a year or so ago, right in the middle of COVID, when he couldn't come in to the building to actually do the job that he was, doing for us. And the attorney advised us that because we had somebody in the finance department that was not the finance director, that was serving as the comptroller, that was a fair checks and balance, and that we no longer needed that full-time comptroller.
And the minority party can still do check checking, correct?
We still do check checking, which again is
Yeah.
not in the charter and it's not in state statute, but we do it as a practice.
Okay. So are we all right then with the B as kind of addressing that problem? Because I think to the extent that this commission sort of not been delighted with the idea of shifting over to town manager, part of it was based on the idea that there could be someone running the show. And I think that this at least makes sure that it's the choice of the first selectman.
Joe, is the word, I can't remember what it was that Joan suggested. Is that it been in there? Was in there? Joan, do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I added the organizational structure. That's what,
Okay. got
and
it.
that you brought up the organizational, and that's where I was like, yeah, that what was missing from the piece.
And we,
So that was good.
we dropped the sole provenance, which is
Thank you.
fine.
Right. Although you're going to get that in there somewhere. I know you are, Joe.
We all have our set phrases. Okay, so I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Other comments on this portion? Is there anything that's missing? I think we asked that question at the end of last time, and it's kind of hard to, you can only edit what you see.
Right.
Is there anything that should be the power of the first selectman that's not there?
So general powers or duties, where does the emergency, like the chair of the emergency management team kind of come into play? Because that's been pretty focused this past year. Hold on one second, I apologize.
Do we have that elsewhere, Lauren? I don't have my
There is
document.
another section on emergency powers. Emergency action 10.1.3. So I suppose we can link it back to here, which we do in other parts of the charter, and just say,
So
yeah,
we could add an H to something along the lines of to govern the town under states of emergency and declare, declare and govern the town and during times of emergency action as defined in 10.1.3, and then deal with it when we get there. I mean, there's been several of these things now in recent years.
So under C, where it says, be the official head of the town for all ceremonial purposes.
here we go.
For
Oh,
emergency
yeah, there you go.
purposes and for the purpose of receiving civil process, does that cover what you're implying as it relates to emergencies?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's where it was. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, we look down instead of right above our heads.
Right.
No, listen, when you look at something for so long, you can't even see the words anymore, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Because, and when we get to 10.1.3, we should probably flesh that out, Joan, for
I
recent
wonder
events.
if seriously on C, you might want to separate, you list 3 things there. Ceremonial purposes and receiving civil process seems to be one. The emergency purposes, quite different. Should that have a separate letter?
It's important enough to have one.
And
Yeah.
this is not something of, get suicidal over, but
Oh,
seems
no,
to me.
not. I think in your role as the head of the style committee, I think it's working very well. No, I actually think that makes all the sense in the world.
To break it out as a separate item?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I don't. Joan, I don't know if that would have made any sense necessarily when it was your charter commission, but now in recent events.
But now that we've gone through a pandemic, it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We were just dealing with hurricanes at that point.
Right. Right.
Yeah, fair.
You can just take out the shall. Official head of the town and maybe manage the emergency management team.
Yeah, but they don't. The EOC is over, it's in that state statute, the EOC is overseen by the emergency management director.
Okay, got it. Okay,
So, I
Yeah.
mean,
But-
you know, the first select person and a bunch of us are on the EOC, but the official like head of the EOC is the emergency management director.
got it. Okay, sounds good.
So probably what we can do is deal with questions of like the ability of the first selectman to call short haul states of emergency on their own. We talked about that a little bit. When we
Yeah,
get
and
to-
that's in
when we get to
10.1.3.
Yeah, as I say, we get to section 10, and that's going to need a revamp. And frankly, Lauren, before we get to that thing, Peggy talked about some of that stuff once upon a time. I would love her feedback, specifically on that section, if you get a chance, just because, you know, she's had to live through this big one. So let's see,
Right.
let's see what
And
she
I
has.
think if the state of emergency is declared within the state, that was a big one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, that's gonna be her number one, because that's definitely something that we run into here is just kind of that concurrent state of emergency if the state declares it, not having to go through the red tape of declaring it on our own if the state has already done so.
Right. But there are times when we do it and the state hasn't.
Yeah,
Right.
but if the state has and
Yeah.
we can't,
then
then
we
it
should
kind of
be
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that doesn't
right.
make sense at all. Right, exactly. Okay.
Anything else with respect to general powers? Then we go to duties and
I
channeling
just-
my inner Bob, the difference being what?
And Bob,
Really
Bob's
quickly
hand up.
on, oops.
Bob, your hands up?
Oh, sorry, that's.
I think his hand's still up,
Okay.
but thank you. I'm sorry, Lauren, you were saying?
Just super quick on A, because there was language in here before about the chief administrative officer. Do we want to put any caveat in here, you know, unless these duties are delegated? You know, something
Ooh,
along the lines of lines, so that, just so that A doesn't prevent us from ever having somebody
Yep.
that has that administrative officer.
Unless the first selectman decides to delegate.
Yes.
or maybe the first selectman shall, you know, be these person or supervise these persons supervise these positions if he or she delegates the authority,
There
like
you
that
go.
kind of that's awkward, but I think it works. Right, you will be the chief executive and chief administrative officer, or or supervise the duties of those positions if he or she delegates the authority.
If these are
to-
delegated.
If delegated.
Yeah. To
If so
town.
delegated. Oh, look at that.
Oh,
So the
Right.
difference between
Ooh.
power and duty, the power is an authority to act, duty is an obligation.
Oh,
okay.
That's Google for you. Sorry.
Excellent.
All right.
I think what we just did, that last one, took care of some of my concerns, so I like that change.
Yeah, I like that too. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Nicely flexible.
Yep.
Okay. Duties look. This is beginning to look like a pretty easy job. There are 2 duties. We had started to talk about report. Well, yeah, why don't we address what's written first?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Like you said, that seems a little light to me. Sorry.
Is it? Well, I guess the question is, what should the charter require them to do?
Right.
Did we put some of we're looking at duties here, did we put some of them, the paragraph above, should some of them be down under here?
In
I mean, being at every ceremonial event, isn't that really a duty?
No, they
No.
don't have to go if they don't want to. So that's the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, if it were a duty, they're in breach of their office. If they
Should we
miss
Duty-
an Eagle
But
Scout.
duty you just said is an obligation.
Yeah, you're obliged to do it versus this is the power, they can do it. So
Okay.
the duties are obliged. Coordinating the administration of agencies, isn't that departments now? Didn't we change agencies to departments in another section?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, because that makes more sense to me now.
What about the state of the town stuff? Should that actually be down here? I mean, because we talked about, them reporting on the town. For me, I'm always interested in seeing if they'll report on the town in the face of, great global changes and exposures. But should that be here?
Doing a state of the town, an annual state of the town?
Yeah. What section was that in?
We saw that. Where was that?
I'm trying to find it.
It was near the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Is that under Board of Selectmen?
I want to say it is.
I mean, this feels like, as a practical matter, this is the job of the first selectman, right?
Right.
Nobody else has the staff to put the state of the town together.
Seems to me
Sorry,
this
I have
should be
a
duty.
collection of golden doodles behind me. You can hear them. They're rolling around.
I saw some paws moving earlier.
Yeah, my only going to be 50-pound puppy is now 75 and pushing.
Mhm.
Go back to, I think it was under town meetings. Like within the first few annual town
Oh.
meeting. There it is.
Just the Board of Selectmen.
So the Board of Selectmen shall designate, which,
Yeah.
do we say the board or should it really be the first there? Should we change that?
The Board of Selectmen technically calls all town meetings.
That's true.
And
That's true.
that's who would vote, and that's how we do it. That's who votes to actually call the town meeting. It's the full board.
How about as a C, represents the Board of Selectmen in all town meetings?
Or
Unless
maybe
otherwise, or,
I was thinking something like, a duty would be at the direction of the Board of Selectmen, comma, the first selectman shall report on the state of the town at least annually. Including,
So you sound good, Joe. I can tell you're a lawyer. That sounds good to me.
I'm literally out of practice.
Because all this is voted on before by the board, and then before, obviously before the first selectman does it, or before they hold a meeting, or before they take a vote, it's been voted on by the Board of Selectmen.
It just strikes me as becoming more and more one of the most important things they do, as everyone doesn't pay that much attention. It's really upon them. So the first selectman shall oversee the creation of is it the state of the town? Did we give it a name?
state of the town report.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, there it is. The state of the town report and present it to the public.
Well, and the 5-year capital plan,
And the
because we want to make sure we get that in there, right?
Well, let's give that as a separate duty. Hey, we're only up to 3.
I'm just trying to think though, the 5-year capital plan, although the first selectman presents it, it's basically overseen by CIP.
Right, but it's their plan to begin with, and then it gets, maybe,
There's actually a distinction. The CIP exists under the Board of Finance, unless that's been
Yes.
changed the last couple of years.
No,
So
I'm sorry, I've got to let the dog out. Apologize.
we're
When-
having
when the
canine
plan
moments here at Charter Review.
Lauren, when the plan comes back from CIP, does any board vote on it? I know all the boards are represented on CIP, but does anybody vote?
the Board of Selectmen votes on it.
Right. So it's the Board of Selectmen can't, and they have limitations. They can't introduce or remove line items or something like that. It's been a
See,
little while.
Joe, it's all new since we were there. This is different than locale. I don't-
Since you were there, Cochise, I actually, this
Oh.
happened, that one happened under me.
Well, that explains why it's confusing.
Yeah, it's exactly, well, but it doesn't explain why I can't remember the procedure.
True, true.
So, and Fillmore had made this distinction once upon a time. So a duty of the first selectman to present their capital plan has a slightly different name. It was the 5-year capital plan, if that's the right one. You know, present 777, present their capital plan, you know, as one thing.
Joe, is that different? I mean, has that
Yeah,
changed?
it is. The CIP report was separate than the capital plan of the Board of Selectmen.
And now it's not?
Well, to my understanding is it still is, because CIP exists under the Board of Finance.
But it's the first selectman who creates the plan initially, and then it
Yeah.
goes to CIP, and then it goes back to Board of Selectmen, and then it goes to the Board of Finance.
Right, but there was a separate capital plan that the Board of Selectmen used that was limited to 5 years that they would create independently of CIP. And they would use it for like bonding agencies and stuff like that. That's the
I-
5-year plan.
Right, that never, I mean, I don't remember ever approving that on the Board of Selectmen, to tell you the truth.
I think
Well,
it
when we-
literally showed up. Well, I think it was in the province of the first selectman to develop it.
Why are they two different things? I mean, now that we had low cap and all 3 boards were represented, and they did come to all the boards, but the Board of Selectmen moved it forward. That's
Right.
changed now, that this committee gets the list of projects from the Board of Selectmen, or the first selectman, I think you said first selectman. So it's, because I remember being on CIP, we would sit around a room and we would throw out projects that we thought, and we were representing our boards. That's all different now. So
Right,
do we
it
need
all
to
goes
go
through, yeah,
do we
it all
need
goes
both?
through
Joan,
the
do we
first
need both?
selectman.
Joan,
Yep.
do we need both? Do we need a 5-year capital and?
I don't think Lauren, are we doing a 5-year capital plan other than CIP?
No. And so what I want to check, let me just go back up to 2.1.4.1 on the left side. I want to see if we changed the language up here. So we didn't. And I think the reason why we just kept this as generally a 5-year capital plan was, what if we in 2 years from now decide it's not the CIP, it's called something else.
Got it.
But I believe the conversation was that this was, insinuated the CIP.
Well,
Got
could I make a suggestion?
Mhm.
Can we punt this and ask Stacy if
Yeah.
these things can just be the same thing? The reason is I'm leery that I think that 5-year capital plan had a function with the existing bonding. And maybe it does, and maybe the CIP could substitute for it. But before we go mucking around with it, maybe why don't we ask her, can these be the same thing? And if it's up to, the first selectman to present it, that's probably okay. We should probably check in with finance too. If I were Board of Finance chair, I'd be screaming and yelling, saying this is our plan, but maybe we can synthesize these things. Because I think it's confusing to the public if they hear about CIP. And the CIP process invites, like civic groups to come in. It invites people to come in and talk and ask for capital expenditure. And then if there's suddenly this other thing, that's probably a little confounding.
Right.
And if we're worried about Joan CIP being in there, we could designate CIP in any, future rendition or whatever, because you're right, the program could change names or whatever.
So
So
it
we
is a term of art adopted by something like half the towns. We looked that up, maybe even more. So
Yeah.
it's pretty established.
You want to point out that we do have Justin Murphy
Yeah.
observing. Wonder if he wanted to have a guest appearance.
Well, good.
Justin, do you have any thoughts on CIP? Would you like to be called in as a member of the public? Did we just add him?
I added him to talk. And I asked him to unmute, but maybe he's actually.
It might take a minute.
Or Justin might be
While
getting
we're
out.
waiting, let me throw out a trivial comment, which is typically what I do. I would, right now, we really have very inconsistent grammar on these letters. So we should make them either gerunds or nouns or consistent. It would read better. In other words, the first is coordinating, the second is not executing, but the execution. And the third, we have not overseeing or the oversight of the, anyway, we just need to be consistent.
Yep.
You said it was trivial.
I think, Bob, you've just named a subcommittee, and I vote you're chairman of it. I think that's a great idea to do it.
Yeah, subcommittee on trivia.
Thank you, Bob.
On grammar, grammar's a loss.
Right. And consistency, we might finally get this charter looking good. I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Hey, Lauren, I'm here.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Justin, I don't know if you heard the question that we had for, luckily for the Board of Finance, and eagle-eyed Matt spotted you in the waiting room.
Yeah.
The-
Well, maybe repeat it. I was distracted a bit, but you were talking about the first selecting capital plan versus or how that might relate, if at all, to CIP.
Yeah, the overall theme is we're talking about duties of the first selectman. The first selectman has a duty to, well, not in the duty section, but they present a 5-year capital plan. Yet we separately have the beloved CIP. And the question is, why isn't it a duty of the first selectman to present the capital needs of the town, which he would then basically be presenting the CIP report.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been on the Board of Finance for 2 years, but like Joan was saying, I've never heard of any separate plan. And I guess I've never thought about it. I mean, the CIP is under the purview or control or whatever word authority you want to use of the Board of Finance. But I think, as Joan said, it's obviously drafted. It's first drafted and presented by the first selectman. So in a sense, we're only, as Board of Finance members, certainly if we have something that we know about outside of it to add or change, but generally we're reacting to what is presented to us by the Board of Selectmen.
So maybe a way to do this is to make a duty to present the capital needs of the town as informed by the CIP as this obligation. That way we haven't gotten into who owns what, but it still gives the first selectman the obligation to present to the public the capital needs of the town.
I like that idea.
Could we ask Justin if he's familiar with a 5-year plan in addition to the capital needs of the town with CIP?
Yeah, no, Noreen, that's what I was saying. In the 2 years, I've only been here 2 years, but no, I'm only, and sometimes I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I'm not recalling any other plan. The CIP is the plan, and it kind of replaced that low cap, which I'm not familiar with at all, but that's my understanding. The CIP kind of replaced the low cap, and that's the only capital plan that I'm aware of.
Yeah, the 5-year plan used to look like a spreadsheet that would appear at the time of the annual meeting. And so we should still, so capital needs of the town, and do we want to put as informed by the capital, good gracious, capital improvement process?
Or as approved by the Board of Selectmen, because they have to do it. Both
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah,
Well, actually, believe it
is
or
it
not, in the regulation, it can go right from the first selectman to CIP. It doesn't have to go through Board of Selectmen at that time, because it comes
Yeah.
back to Board of Selectmen after CIP. But Peggy instituted the review prior to CIP.
So I think if we just make it as informed, that way
Yep.
we don't get
Yeah.
caught as charter review between the Board of
Yeah.
Finance that created it and the Board of Selectmen that initiate it. Like,
Yep.
Is
Yeah,
CIP,
because-
is CIP
isn't
made
it-
up? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't it, Joe, when you were talking about the annual or state of the state or state of the town address, I think she is presenting CIP. I mean, CIP is
Yeah.
really only we only did show 5 years, but in fact, you know, in discussion, it goes out. It actually goes out 10 years, but for the most part, it's only ever shown or illustrated as the first 5 years. So I think we might be talking about the same thing.
Yeah,
I think it over time, there was clearly a time when they were separate, and over
Yeah.
time it might have come to be the same thing, because who would create two? And
Yeah.
and you know, Stacy, Lauren, if you just double check with Stacy on my vague bonding worry,
And
that the
you
report
know,
has some function.
just to remind you, I'm only a member of the Board of Finance. If anything I've said contradicts thoughts of Gene Fitzgerald, I will deny ever being on this call or saying.
Yeah, what I heard you say is you were the definitive voice of the Board of Finance. That's what I heard.
All right, I'm gonna leave now. Thank you.
Just, I appreciate your help.
All right, anytime. Take care.
So the only other thing I would like to see as a duty is to and please, if I'm picking on my pet interest and you feel it's inappropriate, speak up. But I would love to have a positive obligation to discuss the perceived threats to the town, including critical resources and resilience. That's not something we do, and it strikes me that that's one of those important things. You know, and I'd be happy to broaden that out. Things like, you know, even our emergency needs, the critical needs of the town, including efforts to make the town of Madison more resilient, and something broader like that. Because, you know, for things in the past we've talked about that I don't think get presented to the public were the needs for generators at various facilities, the long-term important sorry, reinvestment in emergency services.
Joe, could we go back to where it's the part in the obligation, the responsibilities with civil preparedness? The civil preparedness is in that.
Well, we could expand civil preparedness in that section to include resilience.
Yep, we could include a lot of that in there.
Yeah, so is that the power or the duty is the question.
That was the power. That's what was
I
under the
think,
power.
I think
It's
we
under
need to
power now.
keep it with the power versus being part of a duty, don't you?
So
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Joe, even if it stays in duties, how would you define addressing?
Right. I was going to ask that same.
So it's either, the way this usually works is a municipality does a critical needs and vulnerability assessment. It's a known function. What are the critical resources in town? How vulnerable are they? What types of reinvestment do they need? And it's more than capital, because a lot of it has to do with structures. So for instance, we have our emergency shelter is below the floodplain. We have a problem with hose one that's also was flooded, can be flooded out. I think it's important for and it's not just weather related. The town has periodically looked at microgrids to expand the power infrastructure in the middle of town. So it would include the gas station and CVS. When power's out, if you lose CVS, people can't get meds. If you lose the gas station, they can't pump gas for emergency generators. Those types of questions, and you know, and the 100 we haven't thought of, I think is an important function of government. You know, we're talking about only capital needs, but that's only part of the discussion, and that's going to be changing.
So yeah, I agree.
Go under first or board?
Yeah.
I think it has to be the first. The board's not in a position to do it. You need to be able to steer the town engineer, the planner. Those are the people that you need to ask the questions. Where are we exposed, and how do we make the town safer? And talk about it. If you don't talk about it once a year, it's the easiest thing in the world to forget and move on until it's a problem.
It's going to be staff doing it, and the first selectman is the one that's working directly with the staff.
Yeah.
So, but wouldn't you want any plan or any changes to be approved by Board of Selectmen? It shouldn't just be first selectman going and saying, okay, I'm going to buy a, you know, $50,000 generator and I'm going to give it to CVS because we need it.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that the duty is to communicate to the public where we are and what we're working on. That will then build support for budgets. It's important to understand where the vulnerabilities are. and what we're doing about it.
I
And this
just
is not
pers-
uncommon throughout a lot of towns in the coastline.
I just wish it had a little bit more bite to it. I love what you're saying, but it's not just addressing, I'm always thinking about, having a less than stellar first select person who addresses it, who, states that, yes, we need this, but nothing's done.
I identifies exposures of critical resources and presents plans to make Madison more resilient.
Yep.
I would just throw out, by the way, that this week I've been attending the annual hazards meeting virtually. Usually it's in Boulder every July, but this year it's virtual. But anyway, my point is that resilience is the word of the year, and it's not disappearing. There's enormous research incentives and work going on. Is what do we do about resilience? And it's a local function.
Okay. I think that's, I don't think it's asking too much of the first selectman to once a year shore up that plan and say what you're going to do about it, and in hopes that will move policy.
But I agree with Joan. I think it should be the first selectman proposing it to the whole board, and that's what comes to. I really do. I think this is a big issue. And you just don't know who's going to be in office, if they're going to understand it, and they have to have the help of 4 other elected officials. But the final decision, I think, I think it should be a 5-member vote there.
All right. How about well, one of the things, yeah, all right. I think that's
I mean,
good.
Joe, you have a background on, with the whole coastal management and all that, but what if we had someone that didn't understand anything? You could have a very ambitious, I don't mean to say this, Lauren, but a very ambitious staff person that has a view of what we should do. And this is someone that the first selectman, just by the job, works with very closely. They form relationships. And I think for the Board of Selectmen to be able to come back and talk about what they're thinking to her whole board, I think would help that person, help the first selectman get a better plan.
One of the things.
Joe, you're muted.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I remember participating in identifying the needs. We had a very large group. We were at the senior center at the time. There were definite tables and everybody had to brainstorm out to possible risk issues, anywhere from, septic system floodings on the shore to a breach in the dam that could flood out, town hall, for gosh sakes. So we were just going through and doing the identification. And then I'm not sure that anything came of it. So I like the idea of presenting plans to address, because we started to identify, but then I don't remember ever seeing anything move forward as far as the planning side of things. And maybe there was, it just never was presented back to the Board of Selectmen. So I like that.
How about something that's a little more, going to Matt's point about teeth? How about, create, update, and present to the Board of Selectmen a resiliency plan for the town of Madison? That way it's not just the needs. You're advancing a plan. There needs to be a plan that's created and is updated every year on our resiliency, so it doesn't just get shelved.
Okay, so then now that's not a power, that's a duty then.
Yeah.
We put it up into the power versus a duty.
Yeah, I kind of like it being in the duty section. And
Me
so
too.
as Joe just pointed out, that forces some accountability with that wording.
And we should probably throw the
important.
magic word annually in
You
there.
gotta do it.
Well, yeah, I think that may be ambitious to be annually.
Well, an annual update's not illogical. Frankly, we pay for plans like this from engineers, and we form resiliency committees, and the legislature just passed the ability to create a resiliency board tied to flooding, to flood and erosion control. So there's a lot of, they're not doing it on their own. There are town groups to oversight, but this way at least it spotlights this issue for the Board of Selectmen every year.
It'll just be updated every year, actually. Maybe that's the word we use, update. Oh, I don't know, but that's what they're updating. Most of it, I bet most of it stays.
Yeah,
Yeah, Guilford created one some years ago, and my understanding is they're just largely updating and taking a look at it most of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so then plan of conservation then should be in there too, right?
Yes, though
So
the
that's
plan,
a-
I'm all for that. I would give it its own bullet. It's a separate function with a separate
Right.
statutory existence.
Right. Okay.
Though when
Yeah, I would want to check on the annual with the attorneys, quite frankly, because the statute under which the conservation, the coastal resiliency, it was 18 months to develop the plan. So I want to make sure that we're not going against, it may be every 2 years versus every annual. So,
well, but we can update ours as much as we want. And 1882 went into effect in September 2019, I think. So we're
right.
beating the 18 months.
There has not been a plan created yet. There's
Oh,
been
no,
an ordinance created, but there's no plan created yet.
We do have one. It's not necessarily what we would want. We have one that the last one I saw was compliant. I don't know if it was useful.
Got it.
We presented it at a meeting. But your point's a good one. We could talk. I like the idea of annually updating and looking at the thing. And if that bumps into something, fine, we can make it update, present, and discuss. But at least this
Okay.
way, every new board's addressing it twice.
So let's
term of
remove the
office.
creating then updating and presenting if it's already been created. If we have one that's in.
That's
years
fine.
Yeah. And then I think you do the same thing, updating and presenting on a 10-year plan, right? Plan of conservation?
Yeah. Looking up at the clock, it's 6:01, and I know Liz is going to need to go soon. So what I'd suggest, Lauren, if maybe you could just put a little placeholder here to include language about the POCD. I might want to, unfortunately, Dave has left us, but otherwise I would probably have asked for the town planner to check in because the zoners do that. So, we might want to consider looking at that as part of planning and zoning to report back to the Board of Selectmen.
We have a consulting planner.
Oh.
So
Oh, that's
I can
right.
reach out to John and ask him just to weigh in.
Yeah. So that way we have, both the exposure part, but the thing that's all supposed to help us grow.
Right.
But if it's okay with you guys, then why don't we start to wrap this part up, and I'll see you then on 8/2. Do we have any other questions from the public?
No one has their hand raised.
So Liz, if you see any particular issues you'd like to advance between now and then, just send them on to Lauren, and otherwise we'll pick this up on 8/2. And maybe if you guys can, why don't we see if we can schedule a little bit longer time and we can make it through this and then into the, I think as Joan put it, maybe the Drek part. No, I don't think that's the abyss that is in front of us once we're done with the powers of Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
good.
Hey,
Bye.
guys, you're
Thank
good.
you.
Bye.
So good
Bye.
night.